I know what you're thinking. Is this the booth, drafting the circuits, three-way theater, or the Kevin Jackson show? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I kinda lost track myself here on Whoobazoo.com. So, do you feel lucky, punk?
Whoobazoo Radio.
There was something else going on in Jedi. I never noticed it till today. They built another Death Star, right?
Yeah.
Now, the first one was completed and fully operational before the Rebels destroyed it.
Luke blew it up. Give credit where credit's due.
And the second one was still being built when they blew it up.
Compliments of Lando Calrissian.
Something just never sat right with me that second time around. I could never put my finger on it, but something just wasn't right.
And you figured it out.
The first Death Star was manned by the Imperial Army. The only people on board were stormtroopers, dignitaries, Imperials.
Basically.
So when they blew it up, no problem. Evil's punished.
And the second time around?
The second time around, it wasn't even done being built yet. It was still under construction.
So?
So a construction job of that magnitude would require a hell of a lot more manpower than the Imperial Army had to offer. I'll bet they brought independent contractors in on that thing. Plumbers, aluminum siders, roofers.
Not just Imperials. Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. In order to get it built quickly and quietly, they'd hire anybody that can do the job. Think the average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet main? All they know is killing in white uniforms.
All right, so they bring in independent contractors. Why are you so upset at its destruction?
All those innocent contractors brought in to do the job were killed. Casualties of a war they had nothing to do with. All right, look. You're a roofer. Some juicy government contract comes your way. You got a wife and kids, the two-story in suburbia. This is a government contract, which means all sorts of benefits. Along come these left-wing militants and blast everything within a 3-mile radius with their lasers. You didn't ask for that. You have no personal politics. You're just trying to scrape out a living.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
This is blasphemy. This is madness. This is the booth.
That's how you take down a motherfucker. Oh, that's right.
Now that's a real badge. I'm a real cop, and this is a real gun.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Yo, my raw style belongs in the octagon. I put my opinion on the beats I'm talking on, and I do it all along. Nas said it best, there's only one mic and it's not LeBron. It ain't gonna happen, so stop searching for someone to be the next other person, cause it's not working. I won't be the next, no one is so degrading. Everyone's a critic and it's got me extra motivated. They say soft is rated R, Shawty's already down to a bra. I'll tell her to take it off. It's so hard, I just want her to make it soft. Having dreams about that ass, baby, break me off. A little piece at least, I need some sleep. I'ma be a superstar, girl, please believe. Cause I freak them beats, and I stay stacking money. That's why all these broke rappers stay acting funny. The conclusion is foregone. I'ma make more songs. Undefeated, but won't get my shot on the horn frogs. You corny rappers are corn dogs. They put morons. I'm this beat in the ass, making a porn song.
Was he African?
African.
No. He was American, and he was like you. He looked just like you.
He was Jewish.
Just like you.
Okay, Jew.
Hey.
It's an odd crime for a Jew to come
I'm
up.
pretty docile.
Okay, so we have an African Jew wearing a hoodie.
No, you don't.
No.
No, that's not what I said. Is that what you heard me say? I said he looked like you. Do you look like an African Jew?
No, I look like a cop.
Yeah.
He was Caucasian.
Can you dig it? Can you?
My part, I did a moment of silence.
Well, wait.
It's your boy. It's your boy. Said it's the one broadcasting live from the City of Champions. You are listening to The Booth, and we got a pretty good show prepared for us tonight. We were off. I was away in Mississippi last week, but we're here. back this week. We had a little bit of a show planned, but that was until we had these tragedies strike within the last 3 weeks. Now, these most recent 2, Dayton, Ohio, and we've had El Paso, Texas, are the 2 most recent. But before that, we also had the Garlic Food Festival shooting, which was out in California. So just real quick, we just want to give prayers and blessings out to those victims of those recent mass shootings. And I'm going to give a quick moment of silence for these guys.
And I'll say that this is a silly idea. All these people across the country, every time one of these things happen, you get all these idiots out there. Oh, let's do our prayers for the families. Oh, let's have a moment of silence. You know what? We're long since past that. It's about time for this country to do something about it. Let's not offer thoughts and prayers anymore. Let's not have some stupid-ass moment of silence and pretend that we're doing something about it. Let's energize. The majority of this country wants something done about it. Let's make it happen. Let's stop with these phony gestures. Not us. I'm talking about across the country.
Whoa! See? That's why I love the booth. That's why I love this show. I wasn't expecting that. I'm pretty sure everybody was listening, and this is what I'm talking about. This is why we are ahead of everybody in the curve, and what we do is what we do. RSquared opening the show, full diesel, and I know some of y'all was ready. I know some of y'all was ready to say, "Damn, he's wrong." And then when you listen to what he just said, he's right, because we have a serious situation going on here. In America, you have 3 mass shootings, 2 of the most tragic committed within 24 hours of each other. Tragic. You have a sitting president, who we have debated on this show before anybody else in this network, anywhere else in Boston, anywhere else nationwide. We were talking about Trump becoming president back in April before he was elected. And we talked about the things that he did and the things that we questioned. And a lot of people didn't even touch base on it with us. A lot of people didn't even comment on it. Now everybody wants to talk about the things that he says that are deemed kind of racist. Now everybody wants to talk about the fact that he's inciting people to possibly kill others. I was sickened to my stomach when we were on this show just 2 weeks ago. And the topic on this show was what? It was the fact that he had turned around and went to a rally and allowed people to cheer, send her home. And that was the topic on our show. We talked about this. We talked about the things he says. We talk about the things he tweets and how he, quotations, speaks to a certain mass of people. And that is something he does, and we're definitely going to get into this tonight. And I don't want to jump ahead. We got a couple of quick things we're going to mention, but we're getting into this tonight. So I'm going to let my guys say hello. RSquared, I'm going to let you say hello because you opened up the show. Probably one of the best booth openings I've ever had in my life. I'm so fired up right now. So I'm going to let RSquared jump into this one first. Let him say his hellos, and I'm going to let Ken say his hello.
Yeah, I think I said my hello. I'm ready to go.
To share it, tell everybody to listen. Ken? Because I know Ken's been on this for a minute. The stuff that we're about to talk about tonight later.
Oh, no. I've been on this for a long time because, hello, everyone. And I agree with RSquared because I cannot stand phony gestures. As a matter of fact, we talked about this to show you how on point we were about this issue. Before RSquared joined us, before we became internet radio, before even we were the booth, we were guests of an old show called On the Mark. Do you remember that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We talked about one of the mass shootings back then and about how we need to do something. That was 7 or 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So
and mental illness.
I feel like I'm living Groundhog Day. And for those of you who don't understand the reference, Google it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think RSquared was nasty? No, RSquared was comfort food compared to what I'm going to be laying out to you tonight.
So real quick, we're going to blast out our usual quick topics tonight. We're not going to spend too much time because we got a lot of stuff we got to talk about. And I want to be able to keep an eye on the chat. The phone number is out there. If you plan on calling in, there was a lot of people on our Facebook page or a lot of people on some of our personal pages who had a lot to say. Well, here's your chance. Call the show. You got something to say? You want to talk to us? Don't hide behind your keyboard. call the show. Put a voice behind the face on your Facebook. So real quick, in local national news, real quick, Patriots quarterback Tom Brady extended his contract for 2 years, $70 million. He'll be here till the end of 2020, which he'll probably will retire. I don't see him going into free agency at that time, at that age. He's already put his house up for sale, so he's already looking to do what he wants to do. The rumor is that he's going to be a fashion designer. That's not a joke. That's not a thing. That's the truth. His wife wants him to get into tailoring men's suits. I think Tom Brady with a line of suits would make a lot of money. And to be honest, $70 million for Tom Brady is on the cheap. You've got all of these quarterbacks who just got signed in the offseason for $100 million. And none of these guys equal Tom Brady and what he's done. So real quick, guys, your thoughts. Tom Brady getting signed at only $70 million. Just real quick.
Very simply, Tom Brady isn't going to make his money as a quarterback. Tom Brady is a brand. And if he stays in New England for the remainder of his career, and it looks like he will, but God only knows. If you had told me 10 years ago we'd have a 42-year-old quarterback, I would have said you were insane. Well, so much I know. Tom Brady is going to be like John Elway out in Denver, for those of you who don't know who he is. He was a quarterback of 2 Super Bowl Denver Bronco teams. At one point in the city of Denver, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a John Elway auto dealership or a restaurant or a bar or a parking garage that didn't have his name on it.
Yeah.
This is the same way with Tom Brady. Tom Brady is here for the money only to get the exposure. He is going to be part of the New England organization probably till he dies. He's already got his foundation set up. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts creating a football camp or a fantasy camp for us old farts. So, yeah, and his wife isn't exactly making chump change either. So neither him or his wife are clipping any coupons or applying for food stamps anytime soon.
And like I said, $70 million is on the cheap. He wants to keep players here. RSquared, where you've got issues in the Giants.
I don't think Tom Brady. I don't think that's on the cheap. I think, first of all, Tom Brady's Tom Brady. No one can challenge who he is and what he means to the game. There's no question about it. But he's a 42-year-old quarterback in the last couple of years of his playing life, most likely, and $70 million for 2 years. I don't think that's awfully cheap. I realize the salaries in the NFL are extremely high in the first place, and he could get more in his prime and all that. But it's a 2-year contract just to finish out with the Patriots. I respect that, but I don't think $70 million could ever be called on the cheap.
Okay.
And also remember, that's a $70 million base. There are also
it's loaded with incentives.
I think that if he completes 6 passes in 1 quarter, they give him $100 or some ridiculous thing like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if they make any round of the playoffs in the Super Bowl, he's going to get a big payday. So that's the big, pretty much the local news around here. In sports booth, we have early season ending NFL injuries. Crazy. So our first preseason games kick off this week. It's going to be very interesting because, like I said, didn't the Giants lose somebody for the season? You guys lost the wide receivers?
They lost their starting wide receiver that was supposed to replace Odell Beckham on the field, and he's out for the season with, a torn Achilles or something like that?
Yeah, torn Achilles.
It was a terrible injury for a guy in his second season who was really, really promising last year. And then Sterling Shepard, who, of course, was a big wide receiver for the Giants the last couple of years, went out hurt. He's going to be out for probably at least 4 games, if not more.
Is anybody shining down there that you've heard of? Because you're going to be our Giants guy again this year.
They're not going to replace both of those guys, that's for sure. They've got other prospects. They can put them on the field, but if they're down their 2 starting wide receivers, they're already in a world of hurt before we ever get to the first game of the season.
That means it's going to fall on your running back shoulders again this year.
Well, it's going to be Barkley and Manning that are going to have to carry the team. But look, the Giants weren't going to the Super Bowl this year anyway, but this was supposed to be a significant step forward in their restructuring that was supposed to show what this team was going to be about in the next couple of years. And now I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll have to see. I'm not a gloom and doom type person. Let's see what they do. It's early. Maybe they'll pick somebody up. Who knows?
Who's your first preseason game against this week? Who do you guys have?
You know what? I was focused on the regular season. Always open up at Dallas, which is what I'm focused on right now, is kicking the Cowboys' ass. That's all that matters. The preseason doesn't matter to me. Just stay healthy. Lose every game by 1,000,000 points. Just stay healthy.
Well, there's a lot of talk about Dallas this year, and I have no idea why. They've got Ezekiel Elliott threatening to hold out, so I don't know why there's all this talk about
hold out, Zeke.
there being a big threat. Yeah, there's no. I don't know why there's all this talk. So we've got that. We've got Ty Law, Ed Reed. Congratulations, made it into Hall of Fame this past weekend.
That was a hell of a Hall of Fame class.
Yes, it was. EA Madden 20 came out. Big game. And also last week while I was away, got to mention that the fact that Hall of Famer linebacker Nick Buoniconti passed away, 78 years old. He actually played for the Patriots. He was unhappy to be traded to the Dolphins when that happened. So he was always a Patriots guy through and true. And he was also the guy that he was the first host of Inside the NFL on HBO. He was on that show. That was a great cast. It was him, Dan Marino, and I forget who else was on. I think Chris Collinsworth had got his start in broadcasting on that HBO. Yes, so that was great stuff. I don't know if you guys want something real quick to say about Nick.
Well, Nick Buoniconti was a class act down here in Florida too, and he was part of the undefeated Dolphins team.
Yes, that's
so
right.
That's a legacy that the Patriots almost shared, and so he's got that. And also one of the things I think that's even more special about Buoniconti is he was one of the early players to figure out the problem with the brain injuries. And a long time ago, he, in his testamentary documents, left his brain to Boston University to study the continuing issues with, TBE and all those type, the concussions and brain injuries. So he's leaving a lasting legacy that's hopefully going to help the NFL.
Well, they're saying the dementia that had set in, and there was something else that they said they contributed to CTE, so it's kind of sad that he did do this, and it is sad to see that, that these players are still fighting. Ken, anything you want to add to that real quick? We didn't lose Ken. Ken, you there? Did you mute your mic accidentally? Because I don't hear any breathing or...
Uh-oh. Ken just...
He's got to be there because his picture's still in Skype, so he probably...
No, his picture just fell off.
Oh, he's going to have to rejoin. He'll be able to rejoin, so I'm just going to... Until he rejoins, I'm just going to blow right through it. The Boys debuted on Entertainment Booth. The Boys debuted on Amazon Prime as a humongous hit. The Fast and Furious spinoff Hobbs and Shaw, Tame the Lion King, took the number one spot. And CBS, for those who have CBS and DirecTV, sorry to hear that CBS went bye-bye from DirecTV until they can get their contract straightened out. And last week, 16-year-old Kyle Gerzoff took home $3 million in the first Fortnite World Cup tournament, which was held in New York City. The second place player took home $1 million. So crazy, crazy money. It looks like Ken's back on with us. In the legal booth, real quick, the biggest legal news to come out last week while we were off, and this week, I see Ken is back with us.
Yep, I'm here.
The feds. We've been talking about this on the show, and this is the only reason why I've been mentioning this, because we were talking about this show on the show for day one. The feds allowed the merger of T-Mobile and Sprint to go through. Remember, this was tied up in federal court for almost 2 years because people were saying this was a creation of a monopoly.
And it is.
There would be no something about the antitrust. I'll let Ken explain that one. Something about antitrust violations. I forget. You probably know more than me on that. But they are now going to be the biggest mobile company in the world at this time right now. So I forget what this whole antitrust thing is.
Well, what it was creating what they call a market dominator. Meaning there is no way anyone can give them any type of competition, which is true. They are so big and so powerful, there is no meaningful competition from them, and that's what it is. But that was going on for many years, so I'm not surprised. It's the way the Justice Department's antitrust division has been a toothless tiger ever since the late 80s under Reagan. And I believe we have a guest coming in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah, we got a good friend of Rob.
I think we should hold off till then because
I think so. I just saw that, and I think we should hold off because this is a big issue, and it's a big creation of what I feel is a monopoly of mobile media. So I'm going to let RSquared just talk about his buddy that's going to be on here in 2 weeks real quick. Just give him a quick plug.
Oh, sure. In 2 weeks, we're going to be joined by John Napolitano, who's an interesting character, originally from New York, New Jersey area, signed a contract with the Mets and was with the Mets organization. Unfortunately, he blew out his arm and never got to actually pitch a major league game. but he was with them, knows all the classic players from their original World Series to the Tom Seaver era. So he has some great stories about Major League Baseball then compared to Major League Baseball now, which is something we like to talk about on the booth, which is how the game has changed and whether it's for the better or the worse. But also he made the best out of, when he had an injury that ended his playing career, he was one of the early players into the telecom industry, which is what we were just starting to talk about, and went into the business early, did the mobile phones for a lot of famous New York people, and did incredibly well for himself, retired down to Florida, decided, you know what, he wants back in, now he's back in as a player down here in the telecom industry. So he's got a lot to share. I don't necessarily understand all the details of it, but he may be someone that can tell us about the nuances of that. He's worked for different companies, or as part of different networks, I should say, and should be interesting. So I know John's looking forward to joining us in a couple of weeks.
Well, it's a very competitive industry. Mobile phones are now pretty much the lifeline of everybody in America and across the world. For business, just everything. There used to be a time where you could leave work and your time from work was away from work. But because of mobile phones and smartphones, almost everybody, pretty much I would say 70% of the working force now is on the clock 24/7. If you think about it, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is a couple of lawsuits out there where some people now are refusing to answer their work phones because they're saying it infringes on their free time. They are not responsible to answer their work phone during their time off. I'm pretty sure that's a legal battle that's going on right now.
This has been the subject of a number of CBAs, collective bargaining agreements. A number of places are objecting to it. There's a number of wrongful terminations where people simply refuse to pick up their cell phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I don't blame them. What industry has basically said is that the idea of you working a 9-to-5 job has gone the way of the buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to be available, and if you don't, we'll find someone who is. So stay tuned.
Well, go ahead, RSquared, yeah.
I was just going to say that was always a big issue of concern for me, because while technology has done a lot of things to make life easier, I mean, imagine what it was like when you had to type things manually as opposed to word processing where you could make instant changes and just print it off. Things are great with new technology, the ability to have phones and emails. So many things are better. But one of the problems is, yes, when you're in a profession and you work on salary, you're part of a profession, you're always on duty, you're never completely off duty. But the problem is with everybody having cell phones, and it started with the BlackBerries where you were getting your email and pages, right, and then it became full-blown smartphones. The problem is people abuse that. And so, yes, you're always on duty when there's something important. But the problem is when you've got your devices set up at home, you're checking your email because you're going to get a signal that an email comes in. Well, it doesn't mean necessarily you're supposed to answer it right away. It's just coming in at that time, but yet people are now, they can't help it, so they're sending out an email, they're replying to an email, and people are now, they're sitting there when they're supposed to be enjoying some downtime with their families or just relaxing for a couple hours before going to bed. They're never getting that downtime, and downtime is very important. You've got to keep yourself refreshed and recharged, ready to go the next day. And if there's no break, if it's a 24-hour cycle all the time, where you never know when your breaks are, it's going to have a very strong negative effect on our long-term ability to do our jobs, our job satisfaction, our productivity, and everything else. So what I used to say was, people need to, if they're going to be doing stuff after hours, it needs to be important if you're going to expect people to respond to it. One of the things I did as a supervisor, I'll end with this, is I figured out, it's not so smart, most people know how to do this, but I'm just not great with technology, but I figured out that if I was going to send an email, I could lock it up so that it didn't go into somebody's inbox until the next morning. So this way, as their boss, if they wouldn't get the email from me, that would disturb them at home, but I would want to send it because it was on my mind and I needed to finish up something, I would do it, but then have it frozen so it wouldn't interfere with their evenings, unless it was an emergency. And if they got something from me at night, then I'd say, look, I'm very sorry, but I got to ask you to talk to me for 10 minutes about an issue or something like that, and then we do it because we're all professionals. But the problem is everybody just is on their devices all the time, and it's not right. It's not right. But you're expected to do it, so there's a balance there.
So we'll keep this chat going in 2 weeks when your friend is on the show here. We'll definitely keep that all in mind. So let's get right into it. Trump troubles, prayers for Holy Toledo, man, this guy comes on the TV, gives a well-written speech, because he obviously didn't write this speech. I think all of us were sitting here, and I think a lot of people in America are now on to him. You go on social media, I think a big chunk of people realize that he is not speaking from the heart. He has someone speaking for him. He made the mistake of saying Toledo, Ohio instead of Dayton, Ohio. That infuriated people. And there were some people who were, you still have your Trump Americans out there who he could do no wrong. And I think RSquared, even though I made the joke about it in our private chat, RSquared said it best in our chat. And when I talked about him making this mistake coming off of the July 4th mistake that he made, RSquared, you said it shows he doesn't care. And I want you to explain that and let people what you know about that, because I agree with you. And I think that what you said, I think a lot of people are missing that point. Other presidents make sure to dot the I, cross the T's, and they want to appeal to America. And I'm going to let you get into that, because I think what you said was dead on.
Well, my point is, and what makes Trump unique from other presidents, Republican and Democratic, is when something like this happened, most presidents would return to the White House or cancel their vacation activities and go to whatever they were using as their communications room at their remote location, because sometimes you can't get right back to the White House. But they would go back to work, basically, and they would wear that mantle with pride as a good leader would. Which is, when there's a tragedy, you've got to bring the country together. You've got to be the healer in chief, is I think the term we see a lot, instead of the divider in chief and that type of thing. President Trump continued to play golf over the weekend. He didn't have much to say about it. He couldn't be bothered with it. And when push comes to shove, he sends out a couple of, inane tweets. And then, of course, his staff prepared this really, by White House standards today, it was a pretty good speech if he had just read it with passion. Instead, I have 5 words for you: disingenuous. He was monotone and flat. He couldn't give a crap. We had just had Americans slaughtered in 2 major shootings in 2, metropolitan areas, and he didn't care about either one. He just didn't. Forget the fact we can argue, which we will soon, about his rhetoric and whether he's inflaming this and all that. We'll get into it. We will. But even without that debate, this is his job. This is an important job for any president, and, every president, whether we like them or not or agree with their policies or not, rises to the occasion when these things happen. Think about Ronald Reagan during the Challenger disaster, George W. Bush after 9/11, Barack Obama after Sandy Hook. Every president gets tested in these things. They all have. And President Trump has been tested, but he doesn't care. This goes back to some of the things we've talked about, but he doesn't care. That's just objectively true when you watch him in action and you listen to his words and everything else. He just doesn't care.
And his body language was there, too, because when he had to mention the 2 words domestic terrorism, I could see he had to force those 2 words out. You could read his body language. You could see it in his face. He did not want to touch base with those 2 words, and he didn't want to mention white supremacy because he's been getting beat up and being connected, and you could see that he was very torn. I'm going to let Ken, real quick, Holy Toledo, what were your thoughts on the speech, man?
Oh, you got to be out of your freaking mind. You kidding me? Let's start off with the simple fact of life, people. The man's a malignant narcissist, okay? I don't think this kid would care if one of his own children were gunned down. He couldn't be bothered. And I'm sorry, people, you knew this 30 years ago. And you still voted for the SOB. I am sick and tired of people getting surprised or angry over when he pulls this crap. He didn't want this job, remember? He was doing it so he could build the Trump News Network. He was doing it as an ego blast. The last thing on earth he wanted to be is president. Why should he care if he's not doing the job properly? This man couldn't even be bothered to read off a teleprompter. Do you know how lazy you have to be not to be able to read off a teleprompter with any type of emotion? For God's sakes. Fake it like his wife fakes an orgasm, okay?
Wow. Well, Paul Forrest. Oh, wow. So just real quick, I got to jump in. So I'm on our booth Facebook page where our show is live, and they now are awarding people who listen to our show. Paul has been listening to the show on Facebook for 2 years. He's got a little badge now that says he's an anniversary follower. Michelle Sullivan, she's a milestone follower, so we're going to have to keep that up. We might have to work something here. Paul Forrest in our chat, he says the only in capitals, thing he cares about is popularity. I don't think he loves or cares or hates. He just wants what's going to get people going. We've said that. We've felt that he's felt that bad press is good press. He don't care. He is, at the end of the day, he is a quotation used car salesman, quotation real estate salesman. And I go back to when I used to be a big fan of his reality show, and he told Marilyn Martin when he fired her, she was too nice to be in corporate America because you have to lie, cheat, steal, and step over people in the business that he was in. And that spoke volumes about the type of person that Donald Trump is. And that's a great thing that Paul Forrest is saying right there. Good stuff on that. And thank you guys, too, for listening to the show and tuning in tonight, all you guys out there. I see Van Bates is out there. Gianna Marie's out there. So GOP senators push for a new tax break for the wealthy. We saw that coming. And it's funny because they're on break right now. I believe they're on break till September. For summer recess. RSquared had shared a story. 17 million Americans were purged from the voter rolls between 2016 and 2018. So for you guys who have been listening to the show, RSquared and Ken have both, because Ken served a lot of time in the Democratic Party serving on voter polls. I'm going to let these guys get in, and explain how they've purged these voters from these rolls and how it affected the votes for Hillary in that election. I'll let RSquared go first because he's the one I believe that shared the story, and then I'll let Ken get his point in.
Yeah, I mean, what we know, what we've learned, the Republicans were great during election time of talking about voter fraud in the sense of these unregistered or improper voters voting, which there's practically no empirical data that ever happens, and if it does, it happens in incredibly small numbers of no consequence. But what happens is the Republicans themselves are the ones who hire operatives. We saw this in the North Carolina congressional race that got thrown out because of fraud by the Republicans in that race. You guys remember we talked about this on the show. And this This is what they've done across the country. This is how they defeated Stacey Abrams in Georgia. It's that what they do is they make sure that people cannot vote. They go into densely populated areas, usually minority areas, certainly Democratic areas, and they do things to interfere with the ability to pull up voter registration so that when you go to vote, there's a problem with the computer and you don't get your your name doesn't come up and you've got to go and take care of that, and a lot of people give up. So what they do is they dissuade people from voting. They prevent people from voting. The Russians were trying to do the same thing in a lot of places, including in Florida. So this is something that the Russians and the Republican Party share as a strategy. Whether they do it together or not, I guess we'll see. But they're both doing it. We know that. And so you've got these places. And so it happened in Michigan. It happened in Wisconsin. It happened in all these places where there was a combined total of 77,000 votes that flipped the election Trump's way from Hillary's way, where he won those states that she was expected to win. And it wasn't necessarily, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about Hillary's weak campaign, absolutely true. We talked about all the nonsense in social media from the fake Russian stuff, absolutely true. We talked about, some of the things where Trump was able to, pierce away some disaffected voters. That's true, as well to some extent. But the real reason, the biggest number of votes that was impacted by this were the hundreds of thousands of votes in the states that the Republicans prevented from voting by doing certain things. One was the voter rolls, where they were purging people off the voter rolls or otherwise interfering with that. Another thing they were doing was at the last minute closing polls in these minority and urban areas so that people went to their polls and it was closed and they had to figure out where else to go. Many of them couldn't get to this other place and they couldn't do it in time, and it resulted in long lines where a lot of people weren't willing to vote. You can see the domino effect here. And so you're talking about hundreds of thousands of votes in a lot of these states where people were prevented from exercising their right to vote. I'm telling you, this is the comment I made to Sinister One, and I think it was to Ken also, is, I have aspirations of being involved in politics as a candidate. I've run for local office before, and no matter what office I ever ran for, I'm absolutely true. This is absolutely true. I would not want to win if I thought I only won because people were prevented from voting. I would only want to win if I actually won. Otherwise, it wouldn't mean anything to me. I don't want trickery. I don't want voter fraud. I don't want people, prevented from casting their ballot, whether it's for me or whether it's for someone I'm running against. That's not how you win. That's not democracy. That's not the rule of law. That's not what we're about. So the fact that Republicans are engaging in this time and time again, 2016 was not the first time they did it, and obviously 2018 won't be the last time they did it. They've been doing this for a while. And if I'm a candidate, I would be ashamed to win that way. I really would. I know Trump has no shame, but there are other candidates that benefit from this too. And I just think that's awful. I'll let Ken go in. I know he has more technical information to fill in too.
Real quick before Ken gets his point in, someone actually shared a link from the news I guess there were 3 elected officials who were arrested in Brooks County for what you were talking about for alleged voter fraud. And they were later known as the Quitman 10. So that's a great thing that Paul Forrest has shared with us in the chat. And Ken, I got to ask you a question. Wasn't it you when the election happened when Trump won? Wasn't it you that said there were issues that you had heard about in some states where the polls closed at 9 and people were still in line? And what they did was they had cut the line and told these people they could not vote. And you said that was a violation because you said if they're in line, they're supposed to be allowed to vote. And I believe you made that point, Ken.
I absolutely did. And I, not only that, included a link to a number of articles. I was specifically talking about Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, where there were reports of people who were online. Now, under all 50 states, if you are online at the time the poll is closed, you are deemed to be within the polling area and must be allowed to vote. What happened was in a number of counties, and not all of them, I'm not saying the entire state, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Florida, police officers were telling people that unless you were inside the building, you couldn't vote.
Right.
Now, it has since been reviewed that was wrong, and they claim there was no coordinated effort, that these officers just wanted to go home and they were tired after 12-hour shifts. However, I find it very suspicious that the only places we heard about this were in areas that continue to be swing states and were pivotal to Donald Trump's election. Because
for those who don't think,
military is saying, I once heard from a friend of mine, he said the first time's an accident, second time's a coincidence, third time's incoming enemy fire.
Yeah, because they were still getting numbers in at midnight. This election was not over until like 1:30 in the morning. We didn't know Trump was a winner until like about 1:30. They were still getting numbers in from everywhere.
Exactly. Here's the other thing that RSquared did not talk about. That is, not only did everything RSquared say was absolutely true, we have seen a number of places that had made it much more difficult to register to vote, have made it much more difficult to actually vote by having what you call challenges, which in a number of states you can hold up a ballot by asking someone to be challenged. Not only that, but the voting equipment that goes to certain districts is oftentimes much better than other districts. And this is shown both in 2000, 2004, 8, 12, 16, and probably in 20. That, especially in the South, no surprise, that districts that served lower income minority got older voting machines, more prone to breakdowns, and less of them than richer white districts. Okay?
Well, actually, here in Florida, they gave the old crappy equipment to Democratic-leaning districts, regardless of socioeconomic, because where I vote, we have the old crappy stuff, too, that doesn't work. And we also have people playing games challenging voters like myself. I was challenged in the last election.
Yeah,
and exactly. What did they do with you? I think you mentioned that.
I did. I talked about it on the show.
Yeah,
you did. So
one of my jobs when I was down, remember, I did voter protection down in Florida in 2008. One of my jobs was to if someone got challenged, I was there to advise them on how to beat the challenge. And this actually happened. Someone challenged us and said, "We thought you voted before."
Mm-hmm.
And the voting monitor and I had my book there. They gave us a book. I said, "No, that's not good enough. The mere fact you thought isn't good enough. That person has to sign an affidavit stating when and where that they saw this person voting before. And they have to be advised if it's a false affidavit, it's a felony in Florida. Once we advise that person shut up.
It's a felony, but I guarantee that depending on who's in power, they're not going to enforce it.
Well, it's interesting. There's a gentleman here named Michael Vitale. He's now a judge in Brockton District Court, and I worked voter protection with him. And he had this situation where a young kid came in and only had one form of ID to vote. In Florida, you need two. You need a picture ID and you need an alternate form of ID.
Mm-hmm.
The kid was practically crying. Now, just so happens we were in a library. The voting poll was in a library. And Michael Vitale walked up to us and said, "Kid, got a library card?" The kid goes, "No." "Fine, go get one." I said, "What? Just go get one. Go apply for a library card right over there." He did. He came back, and he said he's got two forms of ID. He's got his driver's license, and he's got this library ID card, which is good enough in Florida. The guy said, "Yeah, I think you're right." I said, "Yeah, I know I'm right." And the kid ended up voting, only because Mike Vitale was there to tell him to get a library card.
Thankfully, we don't need two forms of ID anymore.
Okay, well, you did at the time. I'm not sure.
No, of course. I'm saying, thankfully, they fixed at least one of those things.
Right. Here's something else interesting. In Texas, a gun registration card, or whatever they have for a gun, is deemed to be a valid ID. Okay? But a student ID is not. Now, what do you think that is?
Well, exactly. That's aimed at Democratic votes, yeah.
Aimed at Democratic votes. And they've been doing this, and this is nothing new. I remember years ago, when I was still living in New Jersey, in the 1984 election, which is the first election I could vote in, there was a huge scandal in Passaic County. The local Republican Party had put up signs all over polling places in minority districts that warned people that voting without registering or voting on a false was a felony, and you should think twice before casting your vote if you're not properly registered. Okay? Now, the Republican Party just simply said, "Hey, we're just trying to do the integrity of the elections," but they pointed out that none of those signs were in any white districts. Big scandal, which now led to the passage of a law in New Jersey that prevents any type of signage from non-government officials in a polling place. Okay? So the state of New Jersey, not actually the most known for its electoral integrity, felt that was important enough to pass a law back in 1984. Now, we can get on to gerrymandering and all the other stuff in another show, but I think this is the voter suppression issues that's going on right now. If you don't think it's happening, you're a fool or you're lying. There's no third choice.
It's crazy stuff, and like I said, our election is 1 year away, so we got to get this stuff, taken care of and get on it. So I don't know. It's a crazy thing. So let's get into this. We've had two major tragedies. El Paso, Texas, a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, a nightclub in Dayton, Ohio. Everybody's, there's the whole race card being thrown out. There's political party stuff being thrown out. Now, the kid in Ohio who shot up the nightclub, he was actually, they don't know what party he was affiliated or what he was going to, but he was a big fan of Liz Warren, but he was an NRA guy. But the thing here that stuck out was the fact that he drove to this club with his sister and his boyfriend, her boyfriend, and he went back to this club. They denied him entry, and he came back and he shot up the club. But not only did he shoot up the club, he shot his own sister and her boyfriend dead in this major tragedy. The sad thing is, and we've talked about this on the show, is that this shooter also had a hit list that he was suspended for from school, and then he had a rape list that he was later suspended for in school, yet he was not picked up on any type of list or warnings. his Facebook page and his Twitter and stuff had all types of images and things that should have set the red flags off. He was a member of a band called Porno Grind, which all the lyrics has something to do about the mutilation and killing of women. So he may have had this issue against women themselves. It's just a tragic story all around. This young man, I believe he was carrying an AK-47 in El Paso, Texas. I believe it was almost the same exact gun. And then in the Garlic tragedy was a SKS-47. The issue here is that, and I think I speak for everyone here on the booth, when we talk about this, we've been talking about this for a long time. And none of us here are looking to step on the Second Amendment, which a lot of people are on our Facebook pages. I've seen them jumping on Ken's page. They've been on my page telling me that I'm taking away the Second. No. I'm looking to purchase my own gun for my own reasons already. Ken is a gun owner already. I don't know if RSquared has ever said if he's a gun owner, but I would say, speaking for all three of us, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I believe we all believe in the Second Amendment right for everybody to be able to own and purchase a firearm. Am I correct, guys?
Yes.
No, I don't believe the Second Amendment says that. I don't. I never have. There is no, all due respect to the Supreme Court in D.C. versus Heller, there is no individual right of an individual to buy, purchase, own, or carry a firearm. The Second Amendment strictly was written as a balance against the central government having a large standing army. That's what it was. That's what it is. That being said, yeah, right. I own 4 pistols and a shotgun. I've fired fully automatic weapons at a range. A lot of fun. I strongly advise, if you haven't done it, go out to a range and try one. There's a number in New Hampshire and Las Vegas that you can do it perfectly legal under the supervision of a firearms instructor. That being said, you have absolutely no right to have a fully automatic weapon. Okay? I'm sorry. If you think that, you're a freaking moron.
And I think this is where we're all coming from, and we're getting beat up on social media. I've had people beat me up, and my point is there is no reason for a 19-year-old kid to have an SKS-47 as his first gun. I'm a guy who gets pissed when you see young kids get killed in car accidents at the ages of 16 and 17 because they're entitled and their parent decides, my kid just got his license, so I'm going to go buy him a 2020 Mustang GT 5.0. And then their kid wraps themselves around a pole in there. And I'm like, can we use some parental common sense that there are just some cars you don't buy for a young kid? They're just not mature. And I feel that same way about firearms. I think there are some guns that I don't think should be sold to anybody under 25. I think we should still be regulating guns the way we're regulating them, but I also think we should look at that and say, is this kid or person able to handle that type of firepower? And to be honest, an AK-47 and an SKS-47, somebody said, well, I would use it for home security. No, you're not. An AK-47 is a liability. You're not going to shoot an intruder with an AK-47, have that round pass through that person and hit your neighbor that's 500 yards away or 100 yards away because that bullet has now passed. No, you're not using it for that. Frank Zanowski isn't out hunting with an AK-47. Right. It's going to tear the friggin' meat to shreds.
Let me just hold a second on that point. I've known hunters all of my entire life. My debate partner out of Bromwell High School was a huge hunter. Loved going out hunting. My roommate for 2 years, who's been on the show, Lieutenant Colonel John Dix, has gone out hunting with his grandfather's shotgun. Okay, and he's a huge firearms owner, and he owns automatic weapons. We have a disagreement about that, but never once has he gone out hunting with anything else than a bolt-action rifle and a scope.
Yeah, or a bow and arrow,
or a shotgun for birds. Okay? I don't know a single hunter who has ever walked in the field with an automatic or a semi-automatic rifle go hunting. Okay? And I dare to find one. I barely know. I've been told, although I don't know any of them, there are some people who go hunting with large caliber pistols. Although that's very rare. Most every hunter I've ever met, shotgun, bolt-action rifle, or sometimes bow and arrow.
Well, Paul Forrest is in our chat. He says regulate the people, not the weapon. I'm going to let RSquared answer that question that just popped up in our chat.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First, let me say, on the assault weapons and high volume magazine things, there is absolutely nothing in the Second Amendment that would offend to ban or severely restrict military assault weapons, high-powered assault weapons, the 100-round magazines that they used in El Paso, and things like that. Even Justice Scalia, who is very conservative and very wedded to the Second Amendment and protecting gun rights, even said in the Heller case that those things, if enacted reasonably, would be okay and not offend the Second Amendment. So NRA, gun owners, love you guys, but you have absolutely no argument that it's a violation of the Second Amendment. It's only a willingness to do what's right for the safety and put the safety of our citizens first. And now I can answer Paul's comment, because to some extent I agree. I think we need to do both. There is not one solution that's going to fix this. That's the problem we have, is everybody says, oh, well, that's not going to work. Sure. No one thing is probably going to work, because there are so many guns out there that even if you ban assault weapons, there's still going to be some out there, and the wrong people are going to get their hands on them. And if you ban high-capacity magazines, there are plenty of them out there, and people are going to get their hands on them. That's not going to be foolproof, but it's damn well an important thing to start to take a step in the right direction and at least make it as hard as freaking possible for bad guys to get weapons that can only result in mass destruction of innocent people and no other purpose. Now, for regulating the people, here's where the crux of it goes, because there are a couple of things at play, and I'll try to lay it out quickly so I don't monopolize this, but there are a few very, very important points that have to be raised. Number one is you've got this whole argument about free speech. Now, and I won't get into this, but for over 35 years, since I was in high school and in college and in law school when I was taking constitutional law, I always argued that there was no First Amendment protection for these white supremacist hate groups. And I shouldn't say white supremacist, any form of hate group, any form of hate group, any form of hate speech. I will argue that it's not protected. Now, I'll move off of that for now just to get through this point, and we can get to that later if we want to. But I do not believe that there's a First Amendment protection of speech, assembly, or anything else for these hate groups that preach violence and preach to take away other people's rights and that type of thing. It's one thing to advocate for a political policy. It's another thing to advocate for violence. That is not protected. It never has been, and it never should be. And shame on the Supreme Court for not drawing that distinction more clearly so that we wouldn't be in this mess. But because of that, we have another problem. The problem is that these groups are not necessarily illegal because they have to commit an illegal act first. And so to some extent, law enforcement and the FBI is somewhat hamstrung. In this case, they're hamstrung for two reasons. Number one, because if anybody knows law enforcement, they can't just go do things. They have to follow proper procedures. First, there has to be a complaint or actionable intelligence, and most of the time they can get this stuff from these groups' presence online if they're allowed to do minimum amount of surveillance. But once they do, they have to open a case. There has to be an offense. They have to list a crime that they're investigating them for. And that's where this whole freedom of speech thing is a problem. I don't disagree with the First Amendment. God knows I practice free speech. But the fact is, we have to draw a distinction so that we can criminalize some of this stuff so that the FBI and other law enforcement can actually open cases on these people and do what they need to do what they're trained to do what they want to do. The other problem, as we've learned, is the Trump administration is so beholden and so in tight with these white supremacist groups, even though they don't want to say it, that they have told the FBI, they have restricted the FBI from doing these investigations, from doing this surveillance. So even if they had the basis and the ability to do that, the administration is telling them not to do it, and that's a problem. That's a big problem, and that's grounds for impeachment, by the way, if you want to know, if we get on that later. But that is an unforgivable digression from this president on supporting these groups and preventing law enforcement from doing their jobs. And along those same lines, they've gutted the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Justice, which works on a lot of these cases, so that it takes forever for them to do it. So you've got all of these, these issues that are. So it's not one thing. We've got to fix a lot of problems. One of them has to be, first of all, you've got to get Trump out of the White House, because nothing's ever going to happen when you've got a white supremacist as a president, and someone who, no matter what he reads off a teleprompter, is never going to cut his ties with the white supremacist support group. So this brings me to my last point. I'm sorry, guys. I'll make this one quick. But
no. Roll it on. Keep going.
This is what I absolutely want to say, and I'm saying this is 100% seriousness. This is not a joke. This is not a full diesel. I'm saying this to 100% seriousness. Right now, this country is at a dangerous crossroads, and the Republican Party has shown itself to be, they've made their position clear. Here's where it is. If you are a decent, well-meaning Republican voter and not one of the Trump base that's a white supremacist or supports white supremacists, let me back up a sec. There are two things right now. You either have an enabler that is supporting this president and his white supremacy and his extremism and his rhetoric, or you're cowering in the corner in fear because nobody's speaking out against it. So there's no choice here. Either you speak out against it, either you oppose this stuff, or you're part of the problem and you need to be gone. You need to be out of office. No more sidelines, no more waiting it out. What we have seen recently is the time has come. So Republicans, there's no hiding in the corner anymore. Either you speak out against it or you are actively supporting it. There's nothing in the middle. Now, Republican voters, some of you love President Trump and you're going to back him no matter what. Okay, then there's nothing I can say to people like that. There really isn't at this point. You're disgusting. But for the good Republicans out there, I know plenty of good Republicans out there. Some of them listen to this show. Some of them are my friends I've known for a long time. There are some good, decent Republican people out there that are frustrated, and they're loyal to the party because they believe in its core ideology. They're not necessarily pleased with President Trump. Here's the point. Republicans, you either actively support Trump and you're going to vote for him, and shame on you because you're part of the racist problem in this country, a cycle of violence and everything else, or you need to stay home. Republicans, you either get out there and vote for the Democrats, or you stay home and don't vote for Donald Trump or anybody else who is too cowardly to stand up for him. And here's the point, all right? I got it, Republicans. You want a Republican majority because you believe in economic policy and everything else. You've got to put that aside for the good of the country. The Republicans, Mitch McConnell has to go. Moscow Mitch needs to be out of the freaking Senate. The Senate has to be controlled by Democrats for at least one cycle. Give us the one cycle, prove what they can do to address some of these issues that the Republicans simply will not allow for a vote. It's not that the Senate wouldn't pass some of these reasonable gun restrictions, gun safety restrictions like background checks or something else. Mitch McConnell won't even let it go for a vote. He knows they would pass with Republican votes, not just Democratic votes, and he won't allow it to even come for a vote. Republicans, either you get rid of this leadership or you've got to give it over to the Democrats for a few years for the good of the country. Put the damn country first and rebuild your party for a couple of years and then go back to voting for him. But right now, nope. The Democrats need to be in charge of the Congress and the White House to fix some of these problems, to get rid of these freaking white supremacist terrorist groups that are now out in the open and now empowered because of Donald Trump and the Republican cowards that enable him. And that's the only way this is going to get fixed, the only way. So Republican voters, stay home or vote Democrat, at least this one time.
And I got to, just before I let Ken get in here, somebody was on my Facebook page and they said, well, you had white supremacist issues with Obama. And you're right. We did have white supremacy. To be honest, we had the number one worst white supremacist incident in the history of white supremacy when Obama first got elected, right here in the city of Brockton. When Obama was elected, just weeks afterwards, and Ken will remember this, we had a gentleman named Keith Luke. Keith Luke was so upset at the fact that Obama was elected president that in the fact that he was turned down by women, he went to the home of a Cape Verdean woman, knocked on her door, tied her up, raped her, and stabbed her to death. Her sister came in and found this. He shot her 3 times in the back, killed her. This gentleman then left his house, got into his car, put his music on, blared his music in his car, drove around Brockton, where he then shot a homeless man who was responding to the gunshots that he heard when he shot the girl. Shot him dead. He drove down the street and shot another person. When the cops finally got up to him, he surrendered. Why did he surrender? Because the cops who were there were white and he didn't want to kill any white people. And he had already admitted that if he had not got caught, his next plan was to head to a synagogue that was nearby and shoot up the synagogue. Shows up in the court. He goes to jail. He shows up in the court for his hearing, this guy carves a swastika into his head. One of Ken's best friends had to defend this piece of trash.
Yep.
And it turned this whole city upside down. It was one of the most disgusting displays of white supremacy.
Yep.
And it was right here in our city of Brockton. And the reason why I mention this is because Obama spoke on this. He handled with class. A lot of people, they get on me and say, you're wrong for saying that Donald Trump incited these actions. And the reason why I say we have to hold him accountable, we've talked about this on the show long before anybody else. You look at the things that he's done that RSquared just talked about that has pissed this. You're right. Republicans are at a point. Do you want 4 more years of this danger that's going on? This is a guy, like I said, when we were on this show last, he was at a rally and they were screaming, send her back, and they were cheering. And Trump did not address it. He basked in that. He loved it. And then when he shows up in the Florida rally and he's up there and he's doing his usual spiel and he's talking about these people, what do I do with these people? Somebody yells out, shoot them. Now, most presidents, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, most presidents would have quickly jumped on that, took themselves off that teleprompter, and they would have addressed that issue and made sure that everybody in that room knew that comment was wrong. That comment is what America does not want to freaking hear. Yet Donald Trump sat there. He basked in that comment. He allowed the applause to happen. And then he turned around with what, like RSquared said, that fake face. Oh, we can't say that. Really? Because I remember you talking and bragging about the fact that you could kill somebody in New York and be able to get away with it. And that's where this started. When we mentioned that this was going to be a problem, when he made that comment, you all thought we was crazy. Ken said it. Ken said that's the comment you need to pay it when he said that. And Ken, you were damn right.
I was
you
right.
were damn right.
Yeah,
From day one.
52 years of kicking around this planet, you learn a few things. And let me just say something. John McCain, when he ran against Barack Obama during Obama's re-election campaign, someone said something inappropriate from the audience. McCain stopped his speech and said, no, I disagree with Barack Obama's policies, and I will fight against him, but I respect him as a man, so shut your mouth. He said that. Not only that, when Obama was running for election, his first election, I attended a rally down in Florida, and he said, they mentioned his opponent's name, John McCain's name, and everyone started booing. And you know what Obama did in the middle of the speech?
Mm-hmm.
He said, don't boo him, vote for me.
There you go.
Place went bonkers. Okay? The place went absolutely insane. That's what leaders do. They don't encourage this kind of nonsense. And do you remember, I'm sure you do, Sinister One, I'm sure you do RSquared, after that horrible rally in Charlottesville, when that poor woman was run down by the car? What did Trump say?
Good people on both sides.
Thank you,
RSquared. Stupid-ass thing to say. It's one of the dumbest things in the history of presidential comments.
Okay.
It shows you what he truly believes.
RSquared's point. The Republican Party needs to go the way of the buffalo. If there are people who are fiscal conservatives, who are, small government type people with a rather aggressive foreign policy, fine, start your own freaking party. Join the Libertarians. The Libertarians are very similar to the Republicans on a lot of issues, especially economic issues. They disagree with certain other ones. They are definitely pro-Second Amendment. Matter of fact, one of the women once said that she was a delegate from Vermont, where our carry permit is the Second Amendment. Okay, you will be very comfortable. A lot of you, small government, economically conservative, free spirits in the Libertarian Party. Remember, the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party, is only 100 years old. It was a result of the people being opposed to Democrats, and the Federalist Party had died out, the Whigs had died out, the Free Soilers. So the idea the Republican Party can, dissolve and go and join a new party is not unprecedented. You cannot be a Republican, as far as I'm concerned, and be a decent human being. No, I'm sorry. There is a time where you got to stand up and say, this shit has gone too far. Okay? You got a president who routinely uses racial, religious, ethnic, and gender insults to his opponents. He's called on people to lock up his political opponents. He's called on deporting U.S. citizens. He's even suggested that people down in Texas ought to gun down Democrats. Okay? I'm sorry. You're done. Game over. Not only that, your entire senior Republican leadership, especially in Congress, has been compromised. Now, I know RSquared is going to yell at me because he's very big national security. He doesn't like when I say this, but I'm sorry. I'm calling out. The entire senior Republican leadership, Trump included, are assets of the Russian government. Being paid or being influenced, they are foreign agents. They are assets. They are being used to undermine this country. And you can disagree with me all you want. It's true. All right? When you get a majority of the people going around calling Mitch McConnell Moscow Mitch because one person on a rather not particularly popular morning cable show called him Moscow Mitch. How long did that go? When Joe Scarborough said that, how long did it take before it became a freaking social media I don't know what we call it.
1 hour.
What went viral on social media? 1 hour? 2 hours? I mean, this guy, think about it. Now they're calling Leningrad Lindsay? Okay? It's no longer a question of whether the Russian government meddled in the election. That issue is gone. The issue now is we're deciding, well, who knew, what did they know, and when did they know it? Do you know who the last person to ask that question was?
Who?
Okay. Senator Howard Baker from Tennessee.
Mm.
And you know who he was talking about?
Watergate, I just said.
Right. Richard Nixon. What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Yep.
So this idea, this election, I am sorry, people. Well, I didn't like Trump. I was voting against Hillary Clinton. Nope. Don't have that excuse anymore. You don't like Bernie Sanders, you don't like Joe Biden, you don't like Elizabeth Warren, which I think are the only three people who've got any chance of getting the Democratic nomination, then vote Libertarian. Okay? Go out and vote Libertarian. Vote Bozo the Clown in for all I care. But don't tell me you're voting for Trump because he's the best of a bad lot. No, sir.
Well, I've said this before. I've said that I felt that I feel like Trump's worst enemy is going to come from within. I still feel the Republican Party is going to turn on Trump during this election, and I still feel that
they are not going to turn on him.
Even with what's going on now, you don't think they're looking at themselves. You don't think there's a certain group of Republicans that are sitting and having discussions and saying,
"Nope."
RSquared, you don't think they care? Or
I'll put it to you like this. Right now, I see no evidence of that. I think if this recent week and the revelation of just obvious support for white supremacy and terrorism by the president, there's some backroom talk that is beginning now, and we'll see something in the next few weeks. But otherwise, no, there's no effort to do that. They're all cowering in fear. Hence the point I made that there's no neutrality here. Either they are actively with him because their silence is support, or they have to stand up and do the right thing for the country and oppose his rhetoric, if nothing else. So right now, I don't see the Republicans mounting a challenge to him. I mean, they're not going to support Bill Weld. I don't see any strong cries for John Kasich to get in the race when everybody thought he would be the logical person. I don't see anybody doing it. Where's Ben Sass? There are other people whose names were thrown out there, and it's crickets, and there's not a lot of time left. So if it's going to happen, we're going to see something soon. If I could, I want to jump in on what Ken was just saying, because I do agree. I don't disagree with you actually on that. Okay. What I was actually going to say, I was trying to stop speaking so I wouldn't monopolize the time. But when I was talking about Republicans, now is the moment of truth where they absolutely have to stay home or vote Democratic to clean this up. It's not just this white supremacy issue, and it's not just the gun safety issue, but it's also the Russia issue. And I did mean to say that, so I'm glad that you brought it up. I didn't want to get us off on another issue. But This whole Russia entanglement is serious, serious business. It's not funny. It's not just business. It's not business as normal. It's not just minor corruption that people can chuckle at because they like the otherwise world. This is incredibly dangerous. The president is either a knowing asset or a useful idiot, both of which are terrible things to be true. But one of them has to be true because of his, this whole affinity he has for Vladimir Putin and the fact that he can't still bring himself to admit that the Russians did what they did and to do anything about it. I mean, he is actively in support of Russian interests. Why? We'll figure it out at some point maybe, but he is. That's a fact. There's no getting around that fact.
I think it's real estate.
Mitch McConnell, it could be real estate, but it's more than just that because it's his political future. And if you think that the Russians are not going to double down, if you think what they did in 2016 was bad, they have been perfecting this game, and they're ready for 2020 to give us something we have not even dreamed about or had nightmares about yet. So it ain't over with the Russians, especially because Trump has given them permission to do it. And, who knows if Brad Parscale's even going to coordinate with them because Trump doesn't care. He'll just cover it up. So it'll be interesting. And it's not just Trump because we know that Moscow Mitch, the reason he has that nickname is because he has been actively working with a Russian oligarch to build an aluminum factory in Kentucky. And guess what? All of a sudden, Mitch McConnell is against all election security measures, against all accountability for Russia stuff. Yeah, he says, I was tough on the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union went away in 1991, you stupid idiot. Moscow Mitch is in bed with Putin and the Russian oligarchs, just like Trump is. Now, Lindsey Graham is another problem. Lindsey is just a coward because he thinks he's going to lose his Senate seat, and he's just praying to God that he doesn't lose the Trump support. That's shameful in its own way, but it's a different problem, and other Republicans are facing that problem. But you've got people who are actively supporting Russia's interests over our country. Think about that, folks. When in the history of the United States have you ever seen cause for a president or congressional leaders of either party of any kind to actually have a realistic argument that they are agents, that they are maintaining the interests of a foreign power over our own country, over our own national interests? And yet here we are faced with that unpleasant fact. It's a disgusting reality that we have. It's not something I ever thought I would see in my lifetime in this country. And now we've seen it from the president for the last 3 years, if not more. We've seen it from Moscow Mitch McConnell, and there are a few other enablers in there, especially the Russia caucus in the House of Representatives, that are obviously doing the same thing. And it is absolutely disgusting, and that's why it has to stop. And people, you cannot vote for any of these people. If you do, then you are a Russian agent yourself.
Amen.
We're gonna get us back on track here because we'll talk about this tragedy and the comments. We're very. We're very passionate about what we talk about on this show. And one of the reasons why we're very passionate is because we've been talking about a lot of these things long before any of these other markets and any of these other people are talking about these things. And one of the things we did talk about was about the fact that Trump's words can incite, his actions can incite some of these actions. Now, we had seen some things early on and that question was asked. But now you're coming off, like I said, this incident in Florida where they're allowed to say shoot them. He doesn't address that. And he's always talking about these people or those people. That's always been a racist term when you start talking that way. And now we've had these two shootings, especially this El Paso. This kid had a manifesto. He drove to a location where he knew it was a place that was
600 miles.
10 hours, 650 miles, 10 hours.
And so he knew he had a mission planned, and he carried out his mission. And the scary thing is not only did he carry out his mission, the fact that the state of what this country is in right now, when I heard the stories that there are people that they were looking for that may show up dead in their homes because they were fearful to go to hospitals with gunshot wounds because of our state of our presidency, if they were illegals. And I just thought to myself, and I instantly thought about Ken, because Ken's an immigration attorney, and the fact that this country is at a point now where people with gunshot wounds would be scared to go to a hospital and be treated because they were in fear of either being deported or put in jail. And I got to ask Ken that real quick because it's just, again, that's scary. And we're going to get into the fact of, does Donald Trump's comments incite these people? We're going to get into, again, that fear in immigration, Ken,
Absolutely, because you need to understand, hospitals are required to call the authorities every time they see a gunshot wound. And the authorities under Trump's guidelines are to report anytime they find a person who is not here with the proper authorization to ICE. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's the current state. Because we're not, some guy picking lettuce for $3 a day is a bigger threat to some guy walking in with a modified AK-47 and gunning people down.
I know. And I get into that argument all the time.
I just ran across this article from the Huffington K, and this is getting back to both my comment and RSquared's comment. The Nebraska Republican Party has called upon State Senator John McCloster, McCollister, to quit the party after he accused his fellow Republicans of enabling white supremacists by staying silent on President Trump's hateful rhetoric. So, stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
I saw McCollister's speech, and I saw him interviewed, I think it was this morning on one of the programs, and he was very eloquent in that, in his loyalty to the party, but him calling them. It was people need to hear his words, because it was very well said, and the Republican Party is absolutely foolish for reacting this way, because he did it. I know what he said, but he did it in a way that was loyal, because he was trying to rid the party of a cancer. And that's a loyal thing to do. You're not killing your body by cutting out a cancer. You're strengthening your body. He was trying to preserve his Republican Party that he's been a member of and serving for 50 freaking years. And so what they're doing to him now is shameful.
It's craziness, because you just got through talking about the fact that the Republican Party has to step up and they have to rise above this, and he's immediately downgraded, to say. He's immediately. I don't know. It's sad, and it's like I said, it's a friggin' scary time, and I really don't want to look at another 4 years. And I already know I vote, but I think a lot of people really need to recognize something. A lot of people are on social media, and a lot of people run their mouths, but there are a lot of people out there who are running their mouths, and they don't vote. You gotta vote. You're gonna have to get out there. We say it at the end of the show, week after week after week after week. And it's crazy. And like I said, we've discussed on this show, our president is making these comments, and we've had two major shootings, three major shootings. Two of those were hate crimes. And again, do we feel that this shooter who went to El Paso 600 miles and shot up, he had a manifesto, he believed he was carrying on the same rhetoric that the New Zealand shooter was carrying out. But do you feel that this is one of these guys who thinks Trump is speaking to him? And this is why the words that Trump say, the actions that he does is very, very dangerous. And when do we hold this friggin' guy accountable for the things he says? Can we say that by allowing someone to say shoot them at a rally in Florida causes somebody to say, you know what, Mr. President, I'm going to take care of that for you? Can we? Absolutely. Are we at that point now where we can say this is happening?
Yes.
And how do we hold him accountable? Go ahead,
because he said in his manifesto, he quoted Trump verbatim. Okay? Mm-hmm. When you put in your manifesto things that the president is saying, and when the president calls on, send them back, shoot them up, yeah. Okay?
But how do we hold our president accountable? You can't impeach him. Because you can't impeach him, right?
No, you couldn't impeach him. You could. Because remember, impeachment is not a conviction. Impeachment's only bringing up charges, getting through
What would you use, though? I mean, it's his actions, but...
I would do it. I'll tell you this. When we talk about this, I've been hesitant to support impeachment for various political reasons and substantive reasons, and the Senate's never going to do it.
Yep, you've been very vocal like that, yes.
But I would say this. I would make this argument, and I was thinking about this since these tragedies happened. At this point, because the president's rhetoric is clearly at the root of these things, and his refusal to do the right thing. It's one thing that if he wanted to say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize the impact I was having," and the correct course, but he's not going to do that. He won't ever admit even the slightest mistake or slightest flaw, and he's not going to change course. He's going to continue to do this. In fact, his campaign for 2020 already has the social media ads out there talking about the immigrant invasions and using the same language, the same troubling rhetoric that is causing this. They haven't changed it at all. They're going to use it still. So to me, when you have a president that is engaging in this type of thing, it is conduct unbecoming the office. That is grounds for impeachment. It's not just high crimes and misdemeanors. It also has to do with the failure to perform the duties of his office. And when you have a president that is an overt white supremacist, supports white supremacy, supports domestic terrorist acts, and refuses to correct course, that is the strongest argument for impeachment yet out of all of them, I think. I'm not saying that Moscow Mitch is ever going to let it come through the Senate, but again, if the Republicans finally, grow a pair and do the right thing, then maybe they can pressure him to do that. But again, I'm not saying that it's going to work, but I think this is the strongest case for impeachment I've seen in a long time.
And it's funny because we talked about this because when he was running his campaign, the topic had come up about the white supremacists on his campaign trail. And I remember saying about, bad press is good press. And he allowed these people to stay on his campaign until October. By then, like we said, the damage was done. You gave those people their voice. In October, when we knew that the race was going to be close, then they decided to tell these people, hey, pack up your Confederate flags, your hoods, and all your hate speech. We can't have this at our rallies anymore in October as they headed into to the polls for November. The early voting had started and stuff. It was too late. The damage was done. He had given these people a voice I think they started popping up, and we were talking about them around June. I think it was June we started talking about the white supremacists on this campaign trail. You got June, July, August, September. That's 4 months on his campaign trail, and I think the damage was done. You gave them their voice, and this is why once he was elected in, I think that silent majority that we all talk about that got those flip votes, that white supremacist was part of that silent majority, and we saw it. We saw all those men with torches protesting. We saw all this stuff. We've been seeing all this stuff, and now we're here, and I don't know why people are so surprised, because we've been seeing this. We've been talking about it on this show. This has been building from before he even got into office, this white supremacy issue.
Well, the problem is they're back. In fact, they never left.
Exactly.
They did an expose on this, and I wish I could remember the program. I'd like to give them credit for it. It was one of the nighttime programs that I caught on DVR, and I don't remember what it was. But they actually went through and looked at these groups and at the Trump rallies, the new ones, not the ones from 2016, the ones he's continuing to have, the recent ones. And these these large organizations that are on the FBI's list, ones that are well known to anybody who's paying attention to white supremacy and hate speech and hate groups and violence, they have places of prominence at his rallies. The campaign is not distancing themselves. They're not telling them to stay away. They have places of prominence at his rallies. Think about that. That was kind of the point I was making, that is impeachable conduct. It's not like, well, I can't help but who votes for me. No, you're right. You can't help who goes to the polls and votes for you. You can sure as hell help who you determine who you let into your rallies, who you give a place of prominence to, and who you fail to denounce when they need to be denounced.
And I believe we did see, there was a ton of videos on social media, the people that were leaving the floor of the rally who were screaming at people outside, and they were telling them to go back to their country. Someone told they were making there was a Jewish guy outside, and they were making, comments towards the Jewish gentleman that was outside, and the guy was saying all types of, derogatory things towards him. And these are people coming out of the rally. And like I said, you have now given these people a voice who have no problem at all in broad daylight coming out and saying these things now, like they have a right to say it. We have these instances on social media where we see these people in restaurants, in gas stations. They're popping up and they're just not holding their tongue anymore. They feel like they have this right to say whatever, and it's just a scary situation. And I don't want to see any more mass murders. I think something needs to be done, but I don't think so. And like I said, Ken made a good point. We've had people out there talking about militias. Everybody says these militias have their rights, but they're not.
Hold on. No.
Private
I need
armies.
to shut that down right now.
Go for it.
There is absolutely no right in the U.S. Constitution to form your own private militia. In fact, most states have laws against books, including Massachusetts, by the way, and I believe it or not, Texas has laws in the books against forming your own private armies. Okay? And we also have a federal statute. Can you guess what it's called, gentlemen? Against forming your own private, armed organizations? It's called RICO.
Mm-hmm. The RICO Act.
That's right. So these organizations that promote terror, even if the leaders don't do it themselves, they can be charged criminally under the RICO Act.
But why aren't they?
Well, because, as RSquared pointed out, and as I pointed out, because I sent you guys an article, the former head of the domestic terrorist unit for the FBI has said that the FBI has been under constant pressure from the White House not to go after white nationalists and domestic terror groups because they form a very large section of Trump's base. And he doesn't want to alienate them.
Because I'll tell you right now, I know if I was to get together with a bunch of guys and we legally got guns and we had a place that we could go and hang out, I'm pretty sure they would shut us right down.
Right. So this is the one I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to go out there and open a clubhouse with all of your friends who have a similar skin complexion and start stockpiling AR-15 type weapons and patrolling the streets of Brockton for the white invasion. How quickly would you with the state police anti-gang, anti-gun unit be coming down here?
In a heartbeat.
Well, let's tell you what. I'll bet you $1,000 that if you and your men walked into the market basket at the Westgate Mall armed up, that you would be arrested in about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. You ain't kidding. And it's funny because it's like that social experiment photograph that you've seen on Facebook where they have a black family with their kids with guns and a white family with their kids with guns. Right. And instantly everybody condemns the black family, yet they're all legal gun owners, Right. And it's one of these things. But again, it's something that we have to stop. We can't keep allowing this to happen. Yes, hate is part of this. And like I said, again, we all believe in the right to bear arms. We all believe, and like I said, I'm going to be going for my permit real soon. Right. The thing is like we said.
I just went.
Yep, go ahead.
My concealed weapons permit. I've had a concealed weapons permit for 7 years.
Holy Christ.
Yeah. But since to what? How long have you and I known each other? What, 15 years?
More than that, almost 20.
Almost 20 years. Have you ever seen me, in the entire time you've known me, tool around Brockton with my pistols?
Nope. No.
Yeah.
And you never really talk about it to the point where I completely forget that you have a concealed license. I always forget because you don't talk about it. You don't brag about it.
One revolver and a shotgun.
I didn't even, and you don't even talk about going to the range.
Right.
You only offer that when the topic comes up. You don't. Right. You're not one of these people that go around and
you know why?
Because you're responsible.
No, because I don't suffer from little dick syndrome. Look, my buddy and your friend and your co-host RSquared. Guess where he spent 24 years of his life?
Yeah, military.
Right. So RSquared, did you not have to fire an automatic weapon when you were in the military?
I did. And the only thing I like to say about, personal weapons is all people need to know is I'm a very good shot.
Yeah. I mean, I
shoot expert.
You probably had to qualify on a Beretta 9mm, right?
Yes, not a very good weapon, but it gets the job done.
Okay. You had to qualify an M16?
Yep.
All right. Matter of fact, when he was in the JAG Basic School, and I still have it, he sent me a photograph of him in the full combat gear with an M16. You guys, I think, were going back from the range or something like that.
Yeah.
I still have that photograph. Okay. Now, do you hear? And RSquared's been in a combat zone. He's been in a number of them. Okay. You don't see him, feeling the necessity to tool up when he's going down to the 7-Eleven or the Starbucks or wherever you go down in Florida.
There's just no point in having those weapons for domestic use.
Or the yoga studio. Okay?
You can do home defense with a 9mm pistol or something similar to that. There is absolutely no valid purpose to ever have a military assault weapon for home defense, hunting, or recreation. None. End of story. Zero. No logic. Now, yes, as you pointed out, Ken, they could be fun to fire, and there are ways to do that where you can go to the range, and therefore we don't have to, you deny people the fun to do that. And I have to admit, I like firing those a little bit once in a while, too, for old time's sake. But I don't want to buy one. I don't need to have one in my home.
No, exactly. Look, I'll admit, I got a kick out of it. There is a range, and for those of you who don't believe me or want some more information, you text me or DM me, and I'll give you the name and address of the range in New Hampshire, where all you have to be is 18 years or older. If you're under 18, you need a 25-year-old blood relative to supervise you while doing it. The sign's right there. Go there. You bring a driver's license and $200 for your first time there. They'll give you a safety course taught by there's a number of instructors. All of them are ex-military who, they know how to do it, and they'll take you out to the back range, and you want to run around with an automatic weapon, they'll show you how to do it, and you can do it. And I did it. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, it was a really big treat because they had a 50 caliber machine gun that they brought out for a special event, and I got to squeeze a couple of 20, 30 rounds off of that, and that was a lot of fun. Now let me explain to you what they did. They had it they had it on a tripod, and they had it in what they call a locked variant, meaning you could swing it only to a certain degree back and forth. And they lined up a bunch of water bottles. Let me tell you, I got to see the damage this thing can do. A lot of fun. But you know something? I don't walk around my house with an AK-47 or what's the common one that you NATO forces use? Heckler and Koch.
M4.
What? An M4.
The M4.
Okay. No, you don't. You know what the best? I heard this from a guy, huge proponent of the Second Amendment, and you know what he uses for home defense?
What?
His granddaddy's double-barreled shotgun.
Old school.
He said, "Let me tell you something. It's great. Number one, you almost never jam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're easy to maintain. They're easy to load, easy to reload. They don't require a great deal of accuracy, and even if you don't hit the guy center mass, you hit some guy with some 00 box shot, he's going down.
Yeah,
and he's staying down. And he said the last thing, I don't kill my neighbor 3 blocks away.
Right, exactly. That's the point we're making. I see Jacob Tagger, who was big here in Brockton. He moved out of town. Thank you for tuning in, Jacob. What's up? We are talking about the recent mass shootings. Viana Marie says it's easy to say when you never live in the area where you're a constant target. Chicago, she does make a point there. So we're actually at the 7:30 mark. We want to wrap things up. And we got a lot of great points out tonight that we wanted to touch base on regarding these mass shootings and these tragedies. And like we said, I just wanted to clear up the fact and let everybody know we completely feel that everybody should have a right to bear and purchase arms. We just feel like there needs to be better regulation. And again, we didn't really touch base on it, but I think we're going to close out the show regarding the mental health issue. I think we talked about everything else but the mental health issue on this matter, and I think that's how we'll close out this show. Mental health. We've talked about this on this show way back before RSquared even joined us. The federal government cut funding to mental health programs many, many years ago, and that money has never been put back. So a lot of people who were getting mental health services are not getting those services that they need to get. They're being thrown back out on the street. They're involved in court cases, and, Ken can tell you there's been a lot of guys that he's had to defend, he's tried to get them mental health help, and the funding is just not there. These people are pretty much thrown back to the wolves to try to survive for themselves. I know John Maitland had put on my thing, he had said, hate isn't a mental health issue, but I had to correct him and say, well, hate is an emotion, but that emotion can be derived from depression, heavy depression, which is a mental health issue. So when you have somebody that's suffering from depression, severe depression, and they're going through all these different emotions, and you can go through sadness, you can go through this, but hate is something that can manifest itself in depression. I'm pretty sure we all agree that, right?
No.
All right, go ahead.
No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what drives me freaking crazy. I've been a lawyer since 1992. I've been representing interested clients since 1994. When you are depressed, one of the symptoms of depression is a lack of motivation to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? People who are depressed don't go on shooting sprees. People who are depressed go and get drunk and hurl themselves off a building. People who are depressed stop eating, stop taking care of themselves, stop shaving and brushing their teeth. As a matter of fact, poor hygiene is one of the symptoms you look for in depression. People who are depressed are probably less of a danger to the outside world than any other people.
Wow.
They are. They just don't want to function. There is a total, we call it systemic shutdown. Hatred is the exact opposite. Hatred is when people are manic, which is the opposite of depression. When they're hyper-vigilant, hyper out there. And you can have people who are manic and hatred too and mentally ill. However, these people weren't mentally ill. They were just assholes. Okay? They were just freaking assholes. They suffered from what we used to call back in Jersey little dick syndrome. This is the only way that they can make themselves feel better themselves is by establishing their dominance over the herd. Okay? End of freaking story. Do I think we need more money for mental health? Abso-freaking-lutely. Do I think we need more money for group homes, for medication, for counseling? Abso-freaking-lutely. Has this anything to do with a gun violent culture? Absolutely not.
RSquared?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think we overdiagnose mental illness or depression where it's just people having life. Sometimes life is just hard. But that being said, and leave that for another time, while on the one hand, I agree with everything Ken said. I mean, we do have a mental illness issue in this country with how to deal with it and how to treat it and everything else. However, I absolutely reject, and I think Ken made this point, but I absolutely reject the connection between mental illness and these mass shootings. That is not the cause of these mass shootings. Some of them may have, maybe there's an ability to diagnose some kind of mental illness, certainly, antisocial personality or something like that maybe. But you know what? Mental illness is not causing this. It's hate. It's white supremacy. It's rhetoric. It's this problem we have in society with the fact that we can't just disagree. We have to hate and we have to defeat. And there's a whole bunch of contributing causes. Mental illness is a small part of it. It's an important issue, but it's not the reason we're having these shootings.
And I agree on the El Paso. I think El Paso had nothing to do with mental health. I think you have a guy who is so full of hate. And I think he's been listening to everything that Trump has been saying. And I think that Florida speech did it. I think that moment when you heard shoot them, I think that sent a message, a scary, scary message to a ton of people. And this is what we see. And if they're allowed to continue.
When you keep, let me real quick, Ken, real quick.
Oh, a second.
When the president keeps using the term invasion and words like that, you know what invasion means? Invasion means violence. Invasion means somebody's coming to take something away, if not kill you. And the way to repel and respond to an invasion is by shooting. Is a war. And so when you start using those terms, of course it invokes violence. Of course that's the message it's sending. Of course that's the message these people are going to receive. They think they're fighting a war. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you. But let me ask you this question. When we were attacked on 9/11 by a group of terrorists who ran planes into buildings, did anyone suggest that those terrorists were suffering from mental illness?
Nope.
Why not? Why didn't anyone say, oh, my God, these poor guys are suffering from mental illness? It isn't the plane's fault. Planes don't kill people. People kill people. Right.
We knew they were religious zealots who hated America, and there was no excuse there. I think we all knew, and it sucks that it took 9/11 to unify this country to the point we will probably never see it again because this country is so divided right now.
Right.
We would need another
9/11
to bring
why
us back.
were those people considered mindless religious thugs, and the people who shoot up a church or a Walmart or whatever, they're mentally ill? Because those people are white. And the people who did that aren't. And that's the reason. And that's the problem we're having. These mass shooters are white. And white America can't deal with the fact that we have a white American. We don't have a gun problem. We have a white supremacist problem. And there aren't a lot of people of color shooting up Walmarts. And I say that as a pasty white guy.
And it's great because, people would be expecting me to be on it. And you guys have been teaching me crap. You guys had called Trump's comments racist when I was sitting here torn on those comments at first. And shortly after the show, his comments were deemed racist by the government itself. So, and I myself was wrong. I myself was wrong as a black man. So, I've learned you guys stuff from you guys. So 7:30, we friggin' blew through an hour and a half. The chat was filled. I got to thank everybody for tuning in to the show on our chat. I seen Amy out there. I see Jacob Tagger, Anthony Arnold, all these people out there in the chat. Great stuff. And a lot of people getting involved with this show and talking about it. Jacob Tagger, we miss you. And I'm going to go around the horn and let's say our goodbyes, man. Great show. Good stuff. And again, RSquared, thank you for one of the best friggin' openings we've ever had on the booth. It set the tone of this show. And I'm just sorry that you didn't have the emoji that you needed for 5 seconds ago. So I'll let you say your goodbye first instead.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was a really good show, and it was more importantly, it was a very important show to have. These are critical issues. They can't be dealt with in 30-second sound bites, and I appreciate that we could have a 100-minute long discussion of this with people participating from the chat and with the three of us and in a respectful way. Granted, we didn't have strong disagreement, but we were still respectful about it, and I think we can have that debate in the country. I encourage everybody who's listening to make sure that we do that.
Ken?
I want to thank everyone for tuning in for our extended edition, especially our loyal listeners, all 12 of them. Want to be a big shout-out to my buddy Noah and the opening with his two partners of the Mob Town Brewery/Bar in Baltimore. If those of you who are in Baltimore, stop by, grab a pint. It's really good beer. And for the rest of you guys, folks, all I can say is break out your body armor. It's going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, I got to thank everybody for tuning in the show. I spent the week in Mississippi. I got to thank everybody for bearing with us while I was away for the week. I got to thank everybody that I met down there in Mississippi. I had some great barbecue from Antoine Spann, who used to play for the Patriots. I got to give a big shout out to him. I got a big shout out to Ernest, who owned the Port City restaurant. Had some good conversation with him. He was a New Orleans Saints fan, and I got to say what's up to him and hello to him. Got to mention that America's Scream Queen, Linnea Quigley, will be here on September 24th. We've got RSquared's buddy's going to be here in 2 weeks, so we'll be putting the promos up for that. That's going to be a great show. And for those of you who've been coming down on Thursday nights to Gigi's for Vianna Marie's concert series, we will be back this Thursday, and we're getting ready to head into Prover. Hopefully Ken comes down because we're going to be performing there on the 30th to close out Prover on a Friday night. So hopefully Ken comes down. And I got to apologize to people because I had something in Mississippi that I've never had before for the first time, and people are probably going to laugh at me, but I had oysters for the first time. I've never had oysters before, and they were with bacon. They were baked with bacon and Parmesan cheese. And now I'm hooked. Now I know why when I go to the buffet and I see people with gigantic plates of oysters and looking like gluttony at its worst. Now I know why.
Now we got to teach you to eat mussels.
What are mussels? Are they like oysters or?
They're a grown-up version of oysters. Real men eat.
Are they? You eat them raw? Or?
Yeah, you can, or you can eat them with toppings. I'll teach you how to do it. Don't worry about it.
All right, cool. So I got to thank everybody for tuning in, hanging out with us. Good stuff. Great show. And we'll be back next week on the booth. All I got to say now is SpongeBob, do me a favor and take us home.
Thanks for tuning into the booth at Whoobazoo.com. Please make sure to tune in for more booth next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. New York Eastern Standard Time. Become a fan on their Facebook page and check out their podcast on iTunes and iHeartRadio. The Booth is a Sinister One production hosted by Sinister One, Ken Diesel, and RSquared.
I've got to start hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up here, and all my friends are down here. Me, nah. You guys, nah. Maybe a little more down in here. Screw you guys, I'm going home.